Sagrada Familia. So without further ado, I would introduce Rajvir Sandhu. I hope I spelled your name correctly, Rajvir. We're going to hand over to him. He will be our host for the next hour. He will introduce the topic, the panel, and we're going to have questions from the attendees. You can write your questions here in Zoom. Or again, if you are in YouTube, you can write your questions in Slack if you are there. And what we're going to do now, I'm just going to promote all of you folks to the panelist role, and that should be it. Ravi, can you hear me? Raj?
I can hear you now. David, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Great.
Excellent. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to start my video.
Okay, give me 1 second. Yeah, let's give me 1 second. As I said, we had a little bit of technical issues, but I should be able to allow you to do that. Not sure what it is now. Okay, let me double check if there is a way to do so here. If not, yeah, I think we have it. Okay, you know what? I'm going to make you pause. I think this should work. Does it allow you now to start your video?
And can you see me?
Perfect, right. I can.
Excellent.
Great. Yeah, apologies for the slight, glitch. Again, as I said, we had this technical issue. We had to rechange our links and perhaps we missed a couple of things in the configuration. So I'm basically promoting all of people to panelists and then co-host, and then you can move from there.
Awesome.
Okay, I think this is the last one. Okay, this is the last one. Let me then promote all of you to cost. Yes. Cost. Raj, did I spell your full name correctly?
You did, but you can call me Raj. Most people do call me Raj. Nice and easy.
Okay. Okay, hold on a second. I'm missing.
No problem.
The only one.
I see Lola. I see Marcin.
Yep, online. Hi, Raj.
Everyone is here.
Hey, everyone. Maria here. I'll be joining on video momentarily.
Hey, Maria.
Okay, great. So again, I leave it, the introduction of the panelists to you, Raj. Just for people who doesn't know him, he's a ethical hacker at the World Health Organization. So taking from there, and thank you all of you for joining.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all well. Welcome to B-Sides Barcelona 2021. Firstly and foremost, I would like to thank the co-founders and organizers for hosting such a great event, as well as our viewers and listeners, because without your attendance, these events would simply not be possible. So just to introduce myself, my name is Rajvir Sandhu, otherwise people do call me Raj. I'm today's moderator or host of this session. I have been working in cybersecurity for the past 15 years, providing security expertise to organizations in ethical hacking and risk management. And my current engagement is at the World Health Organization in Geneva. So today I will be speaking directly with 4 panelists who bring with them a significant amount of professional working experience within their own specialist areas of work. So if you would, please allow me to welcome Lola Oguntokun, Maria Dillon, Marcin Hoppe, and Martin Vigo. So if we could start, please, with Lola. Lola, how are you today?
I'm very good, Raj. Thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Please take the opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we can go to Maria, and then off to the gentleman as well.
Okay, brilliant. So my name is Lola. I work as HR business manager for a fintech company called Silverfin, HQ'd in Belgium, and we have a team of remote engineers, and as well as a UK office as well. I actually joined initially to help with recruitment efforts and have kind of progressed into a more traditional kind of HR people ops position.
Awesome, great. Maria?
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Maria Dillon, and I am the head of people here at Times, which is a security automation platform. And we're so excited to be joining you all today. My main expertise is all things people, so talent acquisition, and with a particular view on HR and HR business partnering. So I'm so excited to have a fellow HR person on the panel as well with Lola today.
Awesome, great. Welcome on board. And Marcin, please.
Hi. So my name is Marcin Hoppe. I come here from I live in Poland, and right now I'm a staff engineer or staff security engineer at Auth0, mostly focusing on the security of our platform. But prior to that, for over 3 years, I was a security engineering manager at Auth0, leading a couple of different security teams in application security, vulnerability management, offensive security.
Awesome, cool stuff, fun stuff. And lastly, Martin, please.
Yeah, it's funny we have two Martins in the call, so I can be Martin Vigo and the other Martin.
There you go.
So in my case, I've been 12 years working in Silicon Valley in different companies, actually some of the bigger ones like Apple and Salesforce, and currently at a company related to social networks. I'm on the hacking side of things. So first I started as software engineer, and then because my passion was all things hacking, I did a lot of product security. And currently, because my passion is really the offensive security side of things, I'm working in a red team. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be invited to such a panel of experts, and especially for such an important conversation as we're going to have.
100%. Thank you all. Much appreciated. So as all our viewers and listeners know, our topic for this roundtable session is on cybersecurity skills for high-tech companies. We will be talking about talent acquisition, diversity, and retention, as Martin Vigo just mentioned, which are very interesting topics across all industries, which I personally believe will always attract attention due to its nature. So let's jump straight in. Let's start with the topic on talent acquisition. And if I could begin with asking either Lola or Maria, could you please describe to our audience what talent acquisition is and what it means to an organization in today's world?
Sure, I can take that. Is that, yeah, I'll take that. So talent acquisition is how you acquire your top talent. So how you source, how you find your talent, and how you compete in the people market, within such a strong competitive zone such as cybersecurity. So for us, that is sourcing, finding, getting the hook, getting them in, hiring them, getting them through the process, and getting them in the door into our amazing organization. And it's the difference for me. I don't have a strong cybersecurity background. I have a very strong tech background, and I've learned so much here at Times in terms of how we acquire the cybersecurity people. And it is far more challenging than many other roles within the tech organization.
That's great. And Lola, would you like to add, in addition, anything to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would definitely add, I think it's on the competition piece. Definitely it is a somewhat a war on talent, and understanding what the best is. So, every company and department and team manager will have a concept of what they believe the best is, the best fit. So having a good understanding of what that is for that particular unique opportunity and trying to meet the needs of that, trying to do that effectively.
Oh, that's great. That's a great introduction. Talking about competition and attracting talent, how do organizations, or how can organizations ensure that they are attracting the best talent? And in your opinion, what do you believe are realistic expectations that organizations actually want to see in candidates?
I think when it comes to actually attracting the best candidates, I always think organizations should ask themselves, well, why should anyone join us? Right. So I think when you think of it from that perspective, that's the best place to start. One thing people love, regardless of the type of business it is a challenging opportunity. So being able to solve a problem. And if you're honest about what that looks like, I think that's one of the best ways of actually attracting the right and the best people. Because quite often when someone has been in a role maybe for a certain amount of time, it starts to kind of feel like BAU, like business as usual. And actually, people do often want to get their teeth stuck into something new, right? Or get the opportunity to build or set something up from scratch. So I think really that's the first thing. One, what type of position is it? And what type of opportunity is there for that person to really flex their muscles or build up skills or do a project or activity in a more in-depth way? And then, sorry, I forgot the second part of the question.
Oh, no, it's just really about what organizations, what their expectations are and what they want to see in candidates. But I think from my perspective, a candidate that wants to be challenged consistently is a major plus point, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what businesses are definitely looking for, or what companies are definitely looking for, is quite often when you are joining a company, you're joining to solve a problem. So they are looking for people that have that problem solving mindset. So, we'll probably go on to this a little later on, but this is where, the purpose of the interview is to really understand how you approach problems. It doesn't necessarily mean you always come out with the best solution, but how do you work with people? How do you tackle it? When it doesn't work the first time, what do you do then? Right. So they're using that as an opportunity to really understand whether you're going to be able to do what they need you to do. It's not just about having that technical skill set. It's also how you apply that and how you work, in general as well.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on people skills? People that fit into the organization, especially culture. I think culture is absolutely critically important, and candidates need to be able to fit in no matter what the culture is. Like from my experience, I've worked in banking, I've worked in the public sector, and they're two different industries essentially. Absolutely. Even though my role was very similar, but culture is an important piece, right?
Culture is, it is super important. And actually, what is important to, an investment bank, for instance, won't necessarily be important to a tech startup or scale up. So I think one of the things that's really important is to understand the business that you are approaching or talking to. Do your research. What does their website show you? What do their social feeds show you? If you're not seeing much about company culture, then it could be that there isn't much of a company culture, when it comes to perhaps celebrating people, etc. So definitely do your due diligence and really think about, is this the kind of space I actually want to work in? I also recommend, if you can, go on LinkedIn. Quite often when you click on the company, you can see the people working within that company. Just browse, see where they've been, where have they worked before, again, to get a sense of not just the culture of the business, but the culture of the people who are, the culture that they worked in before, and therefore what they're bringing into the business. So I think really the most important thing is having a realistic sense and understanding of the culture of the business. Because I think a lot of people think, okay, I'm working in tech, so working in this company is going to work in this way. And it really depends on the industry of the company. When was the company founded? That's usually a big indicator as well. So definitely, I would say just do your due diligence and research and see what you can find.
Great, Lola. Thank you. Sorry, Maria.
Yeah, if I could just add to the culture piece, I think they're phenomenal tips. And there's just one thing that has recently come up internally that I'd love to add. We're a startup, and we're really trying to define what our culture is, which, as we all know, is really difficult to do, and especially at this stage. So we've had a couple of focus groups, because we're very much about gathering information from everybody in the business. And one thing that struck me about culture when I was talking about like us getting our statements out there, our values out there, was I was so impressed with the team saying, but let's back it up with actions. So that's the other thing that I'd advise people to look at. There's plenty. We can all think of amazing companies that have the best websites and the best statements out there. But let's look behind that, and let's look at the actions that they are doing to back that up. So what we're trying to do here at Times is start with the actions, so that when we make those statements, we can bring in those examples live on our website, on LinkedIn, on socials, and get it out there. And then the other part of that is in interviews, that we can speak to actual actions and impress candidates that way. That's something that we're definitely looking for. So to flip it on the candidate side, I would definitely recommend they look for the actions as well as the statements.
That's great, Lola Maria. Thank you so much. That's great. And now to, of course, bring our security experts into the same conversation. So, and a question to both Marcin, Hoppe and Martin Vigo. Given the exponential increase in global security incidents, data breaches, news reports that are disclosing new hacks against organizations pretty much on a daily basis from what I see. In your opinion, how do you believe organizations or even cybersecurity teams or IT teams can actually adapt successful talent acquisition programs and ensure that the talent that they are bringing in, again, as Lola Maria mentioned, is to keep them challenged? How can those programs be successful based on what we see today in the real world, specifically to cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is definitely the word out that there is not enough people trained in cybersecurity to fulfill all the openings that we have, right? And as you very well mentioned, with the proliferation, especially of ransomware attacks that got so much visibility to all the audience beyond the hacking community or the cybersecurity people, other companies started to catch up and realizing, okay, I don't want to be open to lose this many $1 million because of one incident. So I need to bring in an expert and take care of this. So one challenge that the industry has is cybersecurity is fairly new. So finding especially senior people is especially challenged. If already, and the HR experts here will know better than me, but if already finding juniors or entry level candidates is already challenging, imagine finding really senior people. I always joke with friends around that here in Silicon Valley, where you will expect that all the experts are, right? There is like 12, 13, 14 CISOs, like the higher ups, the position with the most responsibility when it comes to information security, that just go around the companies, like there are about 15 guys and women that they just change companies among themselves. There are just not much more, just because the industry is like 30, 40, max 50 years if we really go to kind of the 70s when this all started. So it's difficult to be in HR and having to bring people with seniority. So now, to address your question more specifically, how can we do that? My opinion, obviously, from the perspective as one of those candidates, right, what I've encountered, I can speak what is something that makes me go choose a company over another. I was taking notes as Lola was speaking here. For me, one of the things that I've encountered that has literally pushed me away from that company, even though I liked the rest, was not having the possibility to do research and present it at conferences. So for me, that's a big aspect of what I like to do. I could go on and on of the value that it has for the company, but I understand this is not a critic, but I understand that there are companies that are concerned of the legalities or they just don't really understand the culture of of doing research in cybersecurity, going to big conferences to talk about vulnerabilities. They are just scared that you may talk about one of their clients or something like that, or someone will get upset and impact the company or the business. So for me, when I go interview with a company and they tell me they don't have a strong open policy on do research, of course, always responsible, right? I'm not going to drop 0 days or critic vulnerabilities without doing responsible disclosure, but that for me is a turn off, and I will probably pick another company. Then training, being able to get training as you are at the company, that there is a specific budget to at least take a training a year, because cybersecurity in general, computer science, but you get rusty very quick. Like it evolves so fast. And when it comes to the threat landscape, we see how it evolves every day. So if you don't get proper training, if that company doesn't provide you that service, then it's another turn off for me. And then I will add nowadays with how the pandemic has changed the landscape as well, right? Flexibility. And here we have to differentiate, I guess, in ages, right? Probably the new grads, they don't care so much about that. They just want to work on cool stuff and have opportunities to learn. And especially what I would recommend is look for a great mentor. It's probably more important that you have a good boss than a good job, so to speak, because having a great mentor is really going to make a difference at the beginning of your career. But when we look at older people, I don't want to call myself old, but in my age or older that are starting to have families, then flexibility is really important. Being able to work from home, having a hybrid work environment in which they can actually just go several days, or even beyond that. If you want to hire senior people, you can't force them to come to where your headquarters is. If they live in New York and you have your headquarters in San Francisco, and there is a candidate that is really difficult to find over there, don't force him to come here and change their kids from going to that school to a new school, their wives, or if it's the opposite, their husbands, to have to change the job and look for another one. Whatever it is, that's another challenge that makes it even more difficult to find senior people.
That's a great answer, Martin. Thank you. And it's interesting, you mentioned the pandemic and you mentioned hybrid working as well as the remote workforce. So, Marcin, I'd like to bring you in as well on the panel, please. So could you please, from your perspective, the COVID-19 pandemic has introduced this new hybrid working environment, right? And this remote workforce. How difficult, in your opinion, has that transformation been? And what would you say are the lessons learned that we could now take with us going forward?
Right. So it's going to be a little bit hard for me to say what has changed, because the company that I work at right now and previous ones as well were sort of remote friendly from day one. So the teams we've been building were very distributed, like from the get-go, right? So this is something that it's like previously it was not really possible for just one tiny part of a larger company to say, like, we're going to be remote friendly. It had to be like supported from the company, because ultimately security teams work with the rest of the business, with engineering, product management, HR, finance. Like we in our day-to-day job pretty much touch everyone. So if the entire company is very focused on, bringing people together in their offices, and like all the team that's remote would have had a hard time. Now, you're right. Like the companies that have started remote first, I think had it way easier in the pandemic, in that there was literally no change in how they operate. I can only imagine how much of a transition that would have to be for other companies. But talking to a lot of friends, I think the industry as a whole kind of was very successful in adapting. Like some companies did better, some did worse. But a lot of companies, like they had to make that transition and fairly quick at that. So they did. I think one thing that kind of helped all of us was that technology was there, like, video conferencing, instant messaging tools like Teams and Slack, and those things, I think, in their maturity, that they we're in a Zoom webinar. I don't know how difficult that would be to pull off like maybe 10 years ago. And today is just a non-issue. Like those things are just utilities. They work. And I think that was a tremendous help, because then people could focus on organizing themselves and making sure that, their communication protocols are up to the task in this new sort of remote environment, and not fight with the technology. So I think that was, if this happened, say 10 years ago, I think it would have been much difficult. Like one thing I want to mention, and to get a circle back to what Martin said, like I think the companies that are like very flexible, and it doesn't only mean allow people to working from home, but also allowing like flexibility in structuring your day, and the flexibility in like traveling, so working from different places, different time zones, as people kind of find it either convenient or necessary. Sometimes there are like life necessities that we have to take care of. Like those companies do have and will have an advantage, because they're naturally the talent pool they can draw from is larger, but also since everyone is remote, like any person that's joining the company as a remote employee has an easier start. And I think this is like attracting and acquiring talent is like this first necessary step, but everything that comes after that, onboarding people, keeping them engaged and included, I think that's super important as well.
That's great, Marcin. Thank you. And trying not to go off track, but being a security enthusiast myself, I would just like to say, of course, and I'm sure you will agree, going remote, especially for a full workforce during the lockdown phases in whatever country, of course, naturally introduced new threats, new vulnerabilities, more phishing, more scams, more cyber attacks. From your engineering background, what did you see during this difficult time of lockdown where everyone just had to work from home?
Right. So one kind of tricky situation that I think a lot of companies faced was that, companies couldn't afford for the business to stop. Like they needed to ensure continuity of operations. And when people went home, like there's always this question, okay, so how are we going to enable everyone to access the tools, the data that they need to work on a day-to-day basis? And you can kind of do that in a secure way, or you can just open it up to like very kind of public type of access, just to enable people to do their jobs. But if you're doing that in a way that doesn't account for security and access control, you're opening up yourself to a huge risk. So I think companies that had a strong security story around remote access in the past, even if they were not fully remote, but had, for example, salespeople that were like always on the road and like did their homework in allowing them to secure access. I think they had the foundation to enable that secure access from the get-go. And companies that were sort of relying on people being in an office and treating office and corporate network as the security perimeter for the company, like they were in for like a huge readjustment, right? So I think it's like there were companies, even those that were kind of more traditionally office bound, so to speak, that were very well prepared from a security and access management perspective. And I think this sort of story around we know who our employees are, we authenticate them whenever they connect to whatever corporate tooling they need. Those companies were in a much better position than companies that were allowing anyone on their corporate network to access things like corporate intranet, email, and things of that nature.
That's great, Marcin. And Lola or Maria, how was your experience with going to fully remote? Because I'm sure you were probably in the office prior.
Yeah, I was on maternity leave when it all happened. So I came back to a working environment in a previous company that was extremely different and before joining Tynes. So I was really, really happy when I joined Tynes to know that our view on where and how we work is up to each individual employee. No one in Tynes is going to sit and tell you what your working week should look like. We lead with trust, and that was a huge factor for me, especially coming out of maternity leave in particular. So that's something that we're finding is so vital with candidates. They, not only is it like, can I work from home? It is, how do you expect me to work? How are you monitoring me? Because so many companies are either expecting people to come back to an office, or they are like talking about hours or how they monitor them. And people have really gotten used to the flexibility. And it's proven that people can be successful. Companies can be so successful. We've been incredibly successful all throughout the pandemic, which is amazing. So there is no concern around the productivity piece. And good candidates out there, good cybersecurity people know that. And the companies that aren't looking at the remote aspect and leading with trust, I feel are going to fall behind.
Yeah, so I would say that our experience was a little different, but that's because we do work predominantly, well, we've always been flexible. So you could usually always work, I mean, if you work 2 or 3 days from home before, it wasn't too big a deal. People normally did at least 2 days. There were some teams that did more than others. Our engineering team is completely remote. So we've always worked in a flexible way anyway. I think remote-based companies or remote-first companies have been growing in popularity anyway. But when you join a company knowing you're going to be working in an office, then you make that conscious choice for that. And it's because you do enjoy those face-to-face interactions, those physical face-to-face interactions. So I think for a lot of our team, it was a shock. A lot of people felt isolated, disconnected. We had new starters, and it's because we didn't really, I mean, we tried, but the fact is we were never prepared to work or onboard people like this. And we just found that people weren't actually engaged with our culture the way that they used to be. So there was a lot of learning involved in terms of trying to turn things around, but it was really hard work and difficult to sustain. Now we're pretty much back in the office now. We encourage people to come in 3 days a week if they're near an office, but they don't have to. So again, it's very much, look, we trust you, you're adults. You're going to come in whenever you need to, if you need to. And what we're finding is people are choosing to come in on certain days when they know they can collaborate with other people. So that's what we're finding. And actually what we're seeing is people just appreciating each other a little bit more than they did before. So for us, we do like the fact that there's flexibility and you can choose. When someone is remote, especially if they are in the same country, we try to get them to come to the office for the first couple of days or so. We cover the cost of that, but it's just to give them a sense of, silver fin identity, so to speak, just so that they attach to more than the work. They actually attach to people the collaboration piece as well. So it's been an interesting time for us, and we're still working our way through it.
That's cool. That's very cool. If you've got young children like myself, then staying at home, working from home, and managing those is a job in itself. But all good fun and games. No, that's great. Thank you all so much for your answers. I hope it was very valuable for our listeners and our audience. But let's move on to our next, and in my opinion, probably the most important topic based on our discussion today, which is diversity. And a question for all of you, and please don't feel you need to answer this in depth whatsoever. I'm sure a lot of our viewers and an audience have a good understanding on this topic, but in your own words, could you please describe to me and our audience what diversity is, and if you believe that there is a lack of diversity within the tech industry? And we can start with Maria.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry, I was nodding when you said, do we believe this? I was like, yes, yes. I was like, shouted from the rooftops. There is, and we should all be talking about it. Every single person in every tech org should have it at front of mind. And I think that's where we need to get to. I think there is a general lack of diversity in tech in general. But as I said, I moved over from tech in general into a more cybersecurity focused org, and from a TA perspective, that is a struggle. That is very, very, very clear that there aren't a huge range of diverse candidates ready to go like there are in other companies. They're there, but companies need to make a much more deliberate effort to go and source and find and to truly put the effort behind it. And I think for me, that's the biggest piece. And that's something that, back to my earlier statement about actions, we have to lead with actions. We have to be really deliberate about how we do that. And I'll be really honest, and I'm going to make a bit of a statement here. No one has that right. I cannot think of a company that I say they've got it, they're sorted, they understand it. I mean, different companies do well in different areas, but we in general have such a ways to go, and knowing that is a start, but man, do we have to back it up with actions.
Very nice. And Lola, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for me, diversity comes in all shapes and forms. So we're talking about, your background in terms of your ethnicity, sex, it could be even just, your style of communication even. It could be, so I think one thing that I do worry about when we do talk about diversity, I think diversity is very important, but I think we first need to learn what diversity tends to look like. I mean, I even saw a post on LinkedIn yesterday from someone at Monzo, and he was saying that that we need to also consider neurodiversity as well. And it's absolutely true. And I think the most important thing is, one, recognize, okay, do we have drones or clones of people? And if we do, why? Is there a reason why that's important, or we believe this to be important? And how do we change this? Okay. And then on top of that, we say things like, okay, yeah, we want to get people in, but then it doesn't stop there. When you get people from diverse backgrounds into your business, is your business ready for it? Is the culture of your team ready for it? Because what I often see is you hire people, but you don't know how to interact with them. You don't know how to perceive how they're communicating with you. Or, perhaps you don't have the patience to work with them in the right way, to perhaps train yourself, etc. And that is at company level, department level, individual level. Is it actually safe to be different? That's, do we create that kind of safety? So that's one point. And then I'd like to make a final point as well, just regarding how we get more diversity. So outside of the perhaps the traits that you can't see physically. I think we also need to consider that a lot of what people believe they can do starts from a very young age. So how their parents raise them, how their parents teach them the difference between boys and girls and how to react to things, what they should be interested in, etc. A lot of that is implanted from a very young age. What do parents encourage their children to do, right? Do you encourage your children to, I don't know, do ballet if they're a boy, or to do sports if they're a girl? What do you accept? Do you let them explore who they may be as well? And then on top of that, I think we then also need to look at vulnerable communities as well. What do we do to help them have access to these spaces as well? How do you let someone from a deprived community know that there is this cybersecurity space, and actually, how do they make that leap? So I think there are lots of different buckets there, and there's a lot of work, that proactive work that needs to be done.
That's great, Lola. Thank you so much. Martin, Vigo, would you like to say a few words on diversity and if you believe there's also a lack? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, Lola pretty much in a very elegant way said everything that was in my brain, but I will try to add that. So the first thing will be mentioning that depending who you ask about what diversity is, right, you probably get different answers because also because of the society or the specific country, what you see, you may get, if you ask someone what is diversity, they may focus on women, or they may mention a specific race, or they may, or a specific minority. So that's one thing. And me being from Spain, having worked there, but being 12 years in California, in the US, that's especially true. So yeah, one thing is understanding what diversity is, right? Or that it just doesn't stop at the specific thing that maybe is more relevant, so to speak, or more common in your specific country, because it goes beyond that. LGBT community, for example, that we haven't mentioned, that's another one, right? Lola mentioned very great, the company needs also to be ready for that. There is, if you just start to make an effort to maybe target your open roles, or like try to give opportunities for minorities or whatever it is, let's just say minorities as in a global sense, and the company is not ready, you are not going to succeed. You're going to fail because that person, and that's not on that person specific. The rest of the company needs also to be on point for that, so to speak. Then, for example, in my case, when you also mentioned, is there diversity in cybersecurity? I mean, I just have, obviously we need to go to the official data, but when I go to a security conference and I look around, the pattern is clear. It's white males, right? So I, from my personal perspective, definitely there is a lack of diversity. I just need to look around being in conference of thousands of people. And there is, I think, no question in the value of adding diversity to any industry, but, from every perspective, races, nationalities, sex, religion, everything adds. I think there is no question about that. So we should definitely work on that. And then I will just mention specific between the Spain and the US, specifically for me. For example, in San Francisco, the rare thing will be that in a company, I talk to the same nationality. So here in San Francisco, when it comes to nationalities, it's pretty diverse, but that doesn't mean that it's the same case in cybersecurity, for example, for races or for LGBT community. So, for example, here, the nationality diversity wouldn't be so much of a problem. Again, from my own experience as a white Caucasian, but it will be maybe a problem for diversity when it comes to different races, for example. So it is definitely something that we need to understand what diversity is, and that's why Rajvir, it was such a good question that you asked that. What is actually diversity?
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for that answer. So, Maria and Lola, Maria, you mentioned actions, which I thought was great, and Lola mentioned education from childhood. So, what could you describe to me what you believe that organizations in today's day and age what they can do to improve diversity, where it will actually have a positive impact on talent acquisition? And you can see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to link the two with diversity and talent acquisition. So what do you believe organizations can do better to ensure that we achieve diversity the way it should be achieved?
Sorry. I think one thing that I see with a lot of teams is quite often we tend to promote good individual contributors to team leads and managers, right? And that's fine, but if that person doesn't have the right kind of people skills to understand how to kind of manage, different people, that could be an issue. So I think when you are promoting someone, when they are climbing up the ladder and they have more responsibility, there needs to be some training and coaching that goes along with that. And I think before that promotion even happens, they need to already be demonstrating those traits. And that's something that really, from what I've seen anyway, doesn't really tend to happen. Maybe someone will do a managerial track training course, but that's it. Okay, you've ticked a box. Okay, then you're a great manager. No, it's not that simple. So I think there needs to be a much more intensive way of actually looking and measuring that. I think another thing that companies can do as well is just generally, so for instance, even do general training across the business. So what is diversity? Why is it important? What kind of things should you avoid saying, or how should you avoid speaking about different people? So I think if we can have conversations, training and conversations around that, because we don't want that to be a one-way conversation, but there should be a two-way dialogue around that. I think that will help people understand and learn. And when they're hearing the experiences of perhaps a colleague or a counterpart, then it becomes more real for them. I mean, what I have seen happen is, you know, yes, you find, let's say, for the sake of this argument, you find a female who is willing to join the engineering team. She's there for a few months and then leaves. Why? Because people don't communicate effectively with her. Perhaps they're not listening to her when she's giving feedback on, hey, I find this a little bit offensive, right? So I think it's just, we just need a little bit more empathy, and to just take the time to understand people as individuals as well. So not just on work topics, but actually spend some time with this person so you get a better understanding of who they are and why they think the way that they do, so that when you are collaborating work-wise, there's a little bit more understanding there.
Understood. And sorry, Maria, sorry to interrupt, I was going to take the floor, but do you think that what Lola described there would encourage more women and, you know, the LGBTQ community to join maybe the tech industry or any industry for the long term?
Yeah, I mean, it what Lola was talking about there is absolutely vital, but also you really triggered something with me in the general conversation. I feel like that is often missed. That, like, I know I talked about actions and I believe in bringing in like bias training and diversity training and then following it up, but it's also been in a safe space to talk about it. So we might have managers or people that think, oh, I don't know how to bring this up, but I'm a little bit worried about the balance on my team, whether that be gender, whether that be people of color, whether that be race or sexual orientation, whatever it is. But it's also sometimes a taboo subject. So it's really, really important that we talk about it more. We talk about it from a leadership perspective in any kind of all hands, that we bring it into every conversation, that we bring it into our performance reviews, we bring it into our employee surveys. We ask people if they feel like they're safe, if they feel like they are included, and to start touching on the word inclusivity, which is really, really important. I feel like diversity was the topic 10 years ago that we were talking about, just like women in business was 10 years ago. I feel like we need to start thinking about that general inclusivity and how people feel on a day-to-day basis. We talked about how people are working from home. Is there a joke on a Zoom call that makes them uncomfortable because they're not in the office, so they let it go? Like, we need to bring in that culture of open dialogue so that people feel safe and can talk about it more. And that in itself will lead to more actions.
That's great. Thank you, Maria. Marcin, Hoppe, would you have anything to add just before we maybe then move on to our next topic?
Yes. So like, I wanted to reiterate that leadership at every level plays like a crucial role in that. And as companies grow, I think a lot of kind of is set by the early leadership, because as Lola mentioned, there are great employees who later on become team leaders and managers. But I think every time that happens, they kind of grow into that role in a particular context of that company. So if there's lack of diversity and inclusion in company culture at that point, it's very hard to like build that next generation of leaders that will instill that culture. And like, there's tons of work to be done, both for like enhancing the existing structures like teams, departments, and also encouraging and teaching that new generation of leaders that that this is super important, and teaching them how to do that, how to listen to people, how to coach their team members to be sort of more open and behave in a way that does not pull people off. And one other thing is that, like, I think to tie back to the talent acquisition part, is that the interview process is like super critical, because this is when candidates talk to their future boss, their future peers, and if you want to bring in more diverse talent, this is sort of how you show off. This is where you show that this workplace is safe for them to join. So I think this is super critical. So when it comes to training, I think it's not only for managers, it's for everyone who's kind of involved in that interview process.
That's great, Marcin. Thank you so much. And of course, I guess it's one of those topics where we could probably just spend all day over a meal talking about, and with different opinions and different experiences and backgrounds. But no, thank you ever so much. So that leads me on to kicking off our final topic, which is retention. So from my perspective, retention is how do organizations essentially retain or keep their employees? And based on your background and experience, once again, could you please tell us, and the audience, what are the challenges in recruiting and retaining people in general, based on your experience at your current organization? And we can start with Martin Vigo.
All right. I was taking notes here because I have really bad memory. So, I mean, it relates a little bit to the previous question that we had around how we actually get people in first place, right? Yeah. And I personally talked about the aspect of the flexibility and being able to do research and stuff. Going beyond that, once you are at the company, how can we make so you don't leave? I mean, the obvious one I will start with is a career path, right? People doesn't want to get, it depends, because sometimes there is people that they got to a good place, they like the job that they do, and sometimes there's this joke that as soon as someone does his job really, really well, you promote him and change him from that job. Or maybe it's actually not a great idea, because then you set him up for failure. If he's doing a great job there and he's happy there, it's fine keeping there. From the monetary perspective, obviously, you should still be motivating that person, right? But maybe promotion is not always the best path. Of course, the employee needs to choose that. But I think a strong, solid, clear career path is the way to retain someone, because usually, like here in Silicon Valley, right? Because there is so much demand, especially in cybersecurity. The joke is, hey, just if you don't like your boss, look for another boss, rather than, look for another job and stuff. You have really a strong hand if you are in cybersecurity in Silicon Valley, because there is so much demand and so many cool companies, so many cool products to work on. So retention is really difficult. So, and it goes beyond giving free lunches, massages at the chairs. Those are all good, and you get that at the big companies, right? But I think a strong career path is one. Again, flexibility, especially, and understanding that the company shows that understands that with COVID, things have changed. And I definitely understand Maria's point and Lola's point that they had different experiences, and it is a challenge for everyone. I'm just saying that we cannot ignore it. So a company that gives you facilitates a little bit that transition if it needs to be back to the office, because not everyone has a job that can do remote, right? If you work on servers, you need to be on the server rack, fix that. So that's another thing, like the flexibility and understanding and giving tools for people to slowly transition back to what it used to be if they have to, or even be open to remote work. I think I will stop at those two, because I'm sure the rest of the panelists have others to add. But for me, those two are very important.
That's great, Martin. Thank you. Lola, Maria, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just as Martin was talking, what struck me is I loved your point about the massages and all that kind of stuff, because again, if I look back 5 or 6 years in HR and talent acquisition, we were striving to bring in all that stuff, and now that stuff is standard, right? So you have to not only compete with the standard stuff, but you have to really understand what people want on a very personal level. And something that has come up quite a lot recently is a voice and a seat at the table. And I think that's a new thing that people are looking for. And listen, it's great for us. We're a startup on an incredible product. People are interested. And then we give them the opportunity at the size that we are. And hopefully as we grow, to continue to have a voice. So constantly getting feedback, not just on the day-to-day stuff, but on the product, on the mission, on the goals, on where we're going, and getting that feedback constantly from the teams so that everybody feels part of the journey. And that's something that we're really, really striving to do well here, because that is a differentiator. It's no longer the snacks, because we're not in an office or we are part-time, but it's no longer that. It's no longer the dinners at Google. It's more than that. And it's really that self-worth. And what we're hearing a lot of is that voice on the seat at the table and getting heard. We're not always going to agree, but people want the debate. And cybersecurity people in general love a good debate. So it's really, really great to bring them in. And that's something, there's loads of other stuff, but that's something I'm seeing as a key differentiator at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with Maria. I think really understanding what is important to the people within that business or that organization or that team is the first way to go. Again, you can't make everyone happy, but at least being able to understand what on the top line is important to people. And I think generally people want to know that you are willing to invest in them. So whether that's in the view of a career path, and I think the wonderful thing about tech and engineering in general is that there are always these two paths, right? So specialist and managerial. So there is the opportunity to do either one of the two and still earn very well. But even where you don't have that, seeing that the company is growing enough that there's always going to be an opportunity to move into something or perhaps work on another feature or something like that. So it's really more about being able to do something new, learn a new skill, stretch yourself in a new way. I think another way is definitely more around policy than the perks. So, for instance, if you want women to join your organization, what does your maternity policy look like? Like, do you actually have one that will support her in her first year? And so that she feels like, okay, I can actually come back to work because I've been given enough time, or my partner and I have been given enough time with our new baby. And, you know, when they do come back to work, how are they supported when they come back? So I think it's really looking at those policies that help people balance what they want to do personally with what they want to do career-wise. And quite often people have to choose, particularly women, have to choose between the two just because they're not getting the support that they need, whether it's during that period or when they get back. And again, this can look very different for different people, but I think it's just ensuring that we really invest in people, whether it's training, policies, etc., and we support them based on what their personalized needs are.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much. Something I've come across pretty much at every organization I've worked at is employee survey questions. And in all honesty, without no disrespect to any organization I've worked for, I personally have never really seen the value of that. Maybe because I've never stayed at a company long enough. However, in your opinion, how valuable are these employee survey questions to boost retention? And is there a real value in actually doing so? Because I'm sure we've all come across one before.
Yeah, I think there's, sorry. Yeah, I definitely think there's value there. I think depending on the type of organization and business that you have, but especially with us being more remote now in general, it's a great way to get an understanding of what people are thinking, especially because a lot of the feedback is anonymous, and the surveys now also look at things like well-being, as well as how they're feeling about the company and their role. I think where it's a waste of time is you have all that valuable information, and you do nothing with it. I think that's where actually it can be dangerous and detrimental, because people just think, okay, what are we doing this for if you're not actually going to solve these key issues that keep on coming up? So I think when you do these types of surveys, you need to truly be ready to act, not just, hey, yeah, we hear you. That's nice. See you next month, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you have to. It can backfire when you don't. I've seen it backfire when, to your point, Raj, about they roll them out. You answer honestly. You're sitting, you're waiting, and then they'll come out with, here's the top 3 things we're focusing on, and they don't resonate remotely with what you or any of your colleagues wrote down. And I think that's the key point. I think if you're doing them, you have to hold yourself accountable, and back to the transparency piece of sharing every piece of data in that. Obviously, if there's something really sensitive in those open-ended questions, you can't, but it's just so important to be transparent. And the other thing about them is they are very useful, but there's also other ways to do them on a regular basis. Like we have bi-weekly town halls. We're going to have one after this. There's a question box, or there's a comment box. We're going to have a suggestion box virtually in Slack at some point as well, just to keep it regular, because often those surveys are once a year. And I mean, by that point, people could be talking to other companies if there's something that's bothering them. So it's more about that regular, open transparency and getting feedback from the teams on a regular basis.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And Marcin, Hoppe, I think we've just got time for one more question before we open the floor for Q&A. But Marcin, Hoppe, from your opinion, and from your perspective, what do you believe organizations can do more in order to retain employees, especially in such a fast-paced, evolving industry that we work in, which is the tech industry or even cybersecurity?
Right. So if I were to pick one thing, because I would actually pick one thing that the companies shouldn't do, or should do something to avoid that. And that is maybe something we don't talk about enough in the cybersecurity industry, but that is burnout. So I have witnessed that there are companies that are trying to build their cybersecurity teams and departments, but given the, for example, amount of like ransomware attacks that they're facing and like constant fire drills and security incidents, like those environments are burning people out. And this is whether we want it or not, like if people have the choice between a challenging environment where they can focus on an interesting technical problem versus fighting fires all day long, guess which company they're going to choose. So trying to avoid environments where, people are under-resourced, overworked, and burdened with tasks that they're not realistically able to carry out. I think that's a very common problem in the cybersecurity industry. So if we want to retain our engineers, let's try not to do that, or to do whatever is humanely possible to avoid people burning out.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Marcin, for that. Thank you to all our panelists for their contributions so far. Just being courtesy of time, we are now open to questions from our audience, and it looks like I have 2 already. So for our panelists, we'll go with the first question, which is, it looks like nowadays people move companies every 2 or 3 years. That question seemed to have disappeared. Apologies.
So it should be answered, right?
Sorry, have I?
You see that? Yeah, sorry. I think someone marked it as already answered. But
it looks already answered. Okay, sorry. That's fine. So that's fine. No problem. We'll move on to the next question.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh,
Use this one. No, okay. It was just a technical issue. I think someone just clicked it was answered, but it's not. So sorry, go ahead.
No problem. So I'll go ahead. So it looks like nowadays people move companies every 2 or 3 years. What are your opinions about that? Is that an issue?
I'll take that. I worked with a manager years and years ago who had a real issue with that and would immediately look at a CV and go, no, I want loyalty. And those days are gone. Like, those days are gone. And in this space, they're non-existent. So I don't think we should be scared of it. And to the earlier question about attrition, there should be a healthy level of attrition and people should be moving on, and companies should be happy for those that are going on to a better position and learning from it and pinching themselves if they're top talent. But I don't think we should look at it as a problem. I think we should look at it as the way of the world, and also then not judge the person for it when they come through on our applicant management systems.
What I will add to that is, I mentioned before having a clear career path, and ideally that will be going up, right? But sometimes you need to go in zigzag, unfortunately, which is the job hopping, which is like, okay, I need to change careers if I want a bigger opportunity for that. So it is a problem, but the companies also need to learn the why. It could be probably also as well, a case is I just want to go after money. So if I change every 3 companies, I get a new refresher. Here in Silicon Valley, you get stocks for 4 years, so you get the cliff and all that stuff. But it is also a matter, sometimes an issue with the promotions, with the career path. And sometimes you also get bored of the product. In technology, there is just so much stuff. Now you're working on autonomous cars, and then you switch to go to rockets that now there are so many private companies, and then you go work for the Department of Defense or CIA because you want to do more spy stuff. There is so much exciting stuff to work on that it shouldn't come to a surprise, as Maria was mentioning, that we cannot look at it as, oh, this person is not loyal.
Lola, Marcin, would you like to add anything before we move to the next question?
No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Lola.
I think it really depends, because how many jobs over what period of time? I mean, I think it depends. I think if the person is a consultant, then it's expected. Is it 2 years or is it a year and a half? Like, I will look at the months to see like what's happening. Is there a pattern? Does that mean you're gone in a year and a half? And it really depends on what I need from that person and how long I see that lasting for as well. So I think it really depends on the environment, but I think 2 to 3 years is pretty normal now, to be honest. So yeah, sorry, Marcin.
Yeah, I just want to say it's like I observe it's the same reality. Someone changing their jobs every 2-3 years, that's perfectly normal these days. So I personally, and this is like kind of my past experience as a hiring manager, I never saw that as a red flag. Like, if someone changed jobs every 6 months, then yes, probably. Yes, but also, it's also something, as Lola mentioned, to look into, because maybe that person was an independent consultant, in which case is perfectly normal. So yes, it's just, I guess, the reality right now. No, very few people work, lifetime at a single company, which happened before. It's just not a thing.
Okay, that's great. And we've got one more question here, which is, what would be some tips that you have for one-on-one meetings, both for managers and ICs? Forgive me, my acronyms are not the best, but ICs.
I think it's individual contributors, is it?
Well, that must be. Your guess is as good as mine.
I assume so. I assume so. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I assume individual contribution.
Yeah.
Lola, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you what I do with my team. I mean, it really depends on, I think, your space, the pace at which you work, the amount of work everyone has, and the seniority of the people in your team. I think, firstly, regular one-to-ones are super helpful, even if it's just as a way to connect. So I try to do one-to-ones with my team once a week. I try to do it at the beginning of the week to kind of kick us off the right way. I have done other days as well. I think it's really just finding out what works for you and your team. You don't have to be rigid about how you do what you do. We talk about generally how the previous week went. I usually have an idea on what their key projects are. So it's really to see, okay, what does progress look like? What's holding you back in any area? And then we also talk about achievements as well, any areas that are particular challenges And that's what we work on. So those are the regular one-to-ones. I then try to do monthly one-to-ones. Again, it depends, but as a minimum quarterly, where we look over a period of time. Okay, how has this been overall? And is there progress from what we saw before? And I think it's those, particularly the quarterly ones, where we then really talk about the job itself. How are you finding things? Is this still interesting to you? Is there anything else you need to learn? What additional support do you need? So those are some of the things that I tend to personally touch on.
Anyone else from the panel?
I would just add to, for individual contributors to be brave and ask questions of their manager. I've seen it so many times where individual contributors think that their one-to-ones are, the space for them to come and give updates, but really the value is that two-way conversation. So for individual contributors listening and for managers, for their managers, actually, in fact, everyone has a manager at some point. It is really, really important to kind of respectfully challenge and ask questions in those one-to-ones, because that's where the true value lies.
Any of our Martins would like to maybe add something finally?
Yeah, I will just mention that I had kind of the two styles over the different jobs that I had. I wasn't job hopping, so just in case I mentioned that. But I had several jobs, so I had the managers that used it more as give me an update of what you've been working on, and I had managers that was, this is your time. We can talk about soccer or we can talk about job, but this is a connection time. And I like the second one because we have stand-ups to give updates, right, with the rest of the team and stuff. But I really like that half an hour a week or every 2 weeks, which I can literally sit down with my manager and just talk about whatever I want. Because then that's kind of like a safe space if I want to talk about, something that is not going as I want it to go at work or stuff. But I can just also tell him about personal concerns that may be affecting my job, or just in general about something that I want to share with him because I have a great relationship with my manager. So in that sense, the one-on-ones are valuable to me. That time that I can just really talk about anyone. And as one of my managers used to say, this is your time. We can do whatever you want. So, and we actually used to go for walks, which is also cool. Like it's a different experience when you are walking than sitting in an office. So I will actually add that as well. When it's safe to do so, you can always keep 6 feet apart.
Sure. Oh, that's great. Thank you ever so much to all of our panelists for your contribution. I've definitely learned a lot. I'm sure our audience have too. It's a pleasure to host you all. And once again, thank you again. And thank you to everyone at BSides, all the organizers and the co-founders for inviting us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if there's nothing further ado, then we can put a close to the session.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Raj, Lola, Marcin, and Maria. There is one question, but we're going to move that question to Slack because now we have to give space to the next talk. So I don't know who sent it, but let's check on the Slack channel. We'll have Gaetano that will basically move there. We can have the conversation. Again, thank you much, everyone. It was great contribution. Yeah, let's talk for sure at some point. Love you.